If you won't co-sign the loan, Mom, then don't expect to be part of this family anymore. That was the last thing my son said to me before the line went dead. No goodbye, no hesitation, just silence, then nothing. I stood in my kitchen, the phone still pressed against my ear, listening to the dial tone like it might change its mind and bring his voice back. Outside, the Arizona sun was setting over the desert, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. Beautiful, really. The kind of evening my late husband Frank would have called God's artwork. But I couldn't see the beauty. All I could see was the wall in front of me and my own reflection in the microwave door. A 68-year-old woman who had just been erased by her only child. My name is Dorothy Mitchell, and for 42 years, I believed I understood what motherhood meant. I thought it meant sacrifice. I thought it meant always being there, always saying yes, always putting yourself last on every list you ever made. Frank used to joke that I'd give away my last dollar and apologize for not having more. He wasn't wrong, but Frank passed 6 years ago, and somewhere along the way, I stopped knowing where my generosity ended and my self-destruction began. Kevin, my son, had called that evening to ask me to co-sign a $400,000 mortgage. He and his wife Amanda had found their dream home in Scottsdale. 4 bedrooms, a pool, a 3-car garage. They needed my signature because their credit wasn't strong enough on its own. Kevin framed it like a formality. "It's just your name, Mom. You won't have to pay anything. We've got it covered." But I'd heard that before. I asked questions. I asked about the interest rate, the monthly payment, their savings. Kevin got annoyed. Amanda, who was listening on speakerphone, got defensive. "We're not asking for your money, Dorothy, just your support." She always called me Dorothy, never Mom. Not once in 11 years of marriage. I told them I needed to think about it. That was when Kevin said what he said. And then he was gone. I lowered the phone slowly and placed it on the counter. My hands were trembling, not from anger, from something deeper, something I hadn't let myself feel in years. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked to the living room and sat down in Frank's old recliner, the one I'd kept, even though the leather was cracked and the cushion had long lost its spring. I used to sit in this chair after he died just to feel close to him. Now I sat in it because I didn't know where else to go. On the mantel above the fireplace were photographs. Kevin as a toddler, grinning in a cowboy hat. Kevin at his college graduation, arm around me, both of us beaming. Kevin and Amanda's wedding, where I wore the dress she picked out for me because she said my original choice was too mother of the groom. I paid for half that wedding, $32,000. I never told Frank's sister, who thought I was being reckless with my retirement. Maybe I was. I looked at those photos and tried to remember when things changed. When did my son stop seeing me as a person and start seeing me as a resource? When did I love you, Mom become I need a favor, Mom? When did every phone call start with small talk and end with a request? I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling fan, counting the rotations like sheep. By morning, my eyes burned and my chest felt heavy. But I had made a decision. I wasn't going to call him. I wasn't going to apologize for saying I needed time. If Kevin wanted to cut me out of his life over a signature, then maybe I had already lost him long ago. The days that followed were strange. I went through the motions, made coffee, watered the succulents on the patio, watched the news without really hearing it. I kept expecting my phone to ring, expecting Kevin to call and say he didn't mean it, that he was just stressed, that of course I was still his mother. But the phone stayed silent. On the 4th day, I got a text. Not from Kevin, from my grandson, Lucas. "Grandma, are you mad at us?" Lucas was 10. Bright, curious, the kind of kid who asked questions adults didn't want to answer. He was the reason I had kept showing up to family dinners even when Amanda made me feel like a guest in my own son's home. He was the reason I bit my tongue when Kevin talked down to me. He was the only one who ever said thank you. I stared at his message for a long time before replying. "I'm not mad, sweetheart. I just miss you." He didn't respond. Probably had his iPad taken away. Amanda was strict about screen time, except when she needed Lucas distracted so she could go to brunch. That evening, I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened the filing cabinet in Frank's old office and pulled out the folder labeled Family. Inside were records, bank statements, receipts, notes I had kept over the years without really knowing why. Maybe I always knew this day would come. I spread them out on the dining table and started adding them up. The $15,000 I gave Kevin to start his first business, the one that failed after 8 months. The $8,000 for Amanda's emergency dental work that turned out to be veneers. The monthly grocery help of $500 that I'd been sending for 3 years. The car I bought them when their lease ended, and they said they couldn't afford a new one. The flights I paid for so they could visit me. Then the flights I paid for so I could visit them when they stopped coming. The furniture, the appliances, the loans that were never paid back. I added it all up. $127,000. Over 6 years. I sat back in my chair and stared at the number. That was more than I had left in my savings. That was my safety net, my peace of mind, my ability to stay in this house if something went wrong. I had given it away piece by piece, and I hadn't even noticed until now. The next morning, I called my bank. I asked them to stop the automatic transfer I had set up to Kevin's account. The woman on the phone confirmed the cancellation without judgment. I thanked her and hung up. Then I sat in the kitchen and cried, not because I regretted stopping the money, because I regretted ever starting it. A week passed, then 2. I heard nothing from Kevin or Amanda. No calls, no texts, no apologies. Just silence, thick and final. I told myself I was okay with it. I told myself this was what I wanted. But every time the phone buzzed, my heart jumped. And every time it was just a spam call or a weather alert, something inside me sank a little deeper. It was my neighbor, June, who finally pulled me out of the fog. She showed up one afternoon with a casserole and a bottle of wine, insisting I needed company. June was 73, widowed like me, and had a way of saying hard truths with a soft voice. "You look like you've been carrying a refrigerator up a hill," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "What's going on?" I told her everything. The phone call, the cosign request, the silence, the $127,000. She listened without interrupting, nodding occasionally, her eyes sharp and kind. When I finished, she set down her wine glass and looked at me. "Dorothy, can I say something that might hurt?" I nodded. "You didn't raise a son. You raised a customer." I opened my mouth to defend him, but nothing came out, because she was right. Somewhere along the way, I had turned my love into a transaction, and Kevin had learned to treat it like one. "The question isn't whether he'll come back," June said gently. "The question is whether you'll still be standing when he does." That night, I made a decision. I called my attorney, a man named Richard Gaines, who had helped Frank and me with our estate planning years ago. I told him I wanted to update my will. He asked if everything was all right. I said no, but it would be. We met the following week. Richard's office smelled like leather and old books, the kind of place that made you feel like serious things happened there. He listened as I explained what I wanted. "I'm removing Kevin from the will," I said, "and Amanda. Everything goes to Lucas, held in trust, until he's 25. Richard didn't flinch. "Are you certain?" "I've never been more certain of anything." He made notes, asked questions, explained the process. When we were done, he looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "I've seen a lot of families come through this office," he said. "Most people who make changes like this are angry. You don't seem angry." I thought about that. "I was angry," I said. "Now I'm just tired of waiting to be enough." The papers were signed the following week. Richard filed everything, and I drove home with the windows down, the desert air warm against my face. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt light, like I had set down a suitcase I'd been carrying for years without realizing how heavy it was. 3 days later, Kevin called. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. Mom! His voice was tight. I heard you changed your will. I didn't ask how he found out. Probably Amanda had a friend at the bank or the law firm. It didn't matter. I did, I said calmly. You're cutting me out? Your own son? I'm not cutting you out, Kevin. I'm just not funding you anymore. There was a long pause. I could hear Amanda in the background, whispering something sharp. This is unbelievable, Kevin said. After everything we've done for you. I almost laughed. Almost. What have you done for me, Kevin? Tell me. I'd like to know. He couldn't answer. Because there was no answer. I've spent 6 years writing checks and showing up and pretending not to notice that I'm only welcome when I'm useful, I said. You told me not to be part of this family if I wouldn't co-sign your loan. So, I'm taking you at your word. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? More silence. Then Amanda's voice, loud and clear. Kevin, hang up. She's not worth it. The line went dead. I stood there for a moment, phone in hand, waiting for the grief to hit, but it didn't. What came instead was something quieter, a kind of peace I hadn't felt in years. I set the phone down and made myself a cup of tea. The weeks that followed were strange and slow. I relearned how to fill my days without waiting for someone to need me. I started a garden, took a watercolor class at the community center, had dinner with June twice a week. I read books I'd been meaning to read for years. I sat on my patio in the evenings and watched the sunset without checking my phone. One Saturday morning, there was a knock at my door. I opened it to find Lucas standing on my porch, his bicycle lying in the driveway, his face red from the ride. Grandma, he said, out of breath. I told Mom I was going to Jake's house. I looked at him. 10 years old, standing in the Arizona heat, having ridden 3 miles just to see me. Come inside, I said. Before you melt, I made him lemonade and sat across from him at the kitchen table. He drank half the glass in one gulp, then set it down and looked at me with those serious brown eyes. Are you and Dad in a fight? I chose my words carefully. We're having a disagreement, but it has nothing to do with you. Mom says you're being selfish. I nodded slowly. She might be right. I am being selfish. For the first time in a very long time. Lucas frowned. I don't think you're selfish. You're the only one who remembers my birthday without checking Facebook. I smiled. I remember because I was there when you were born. I held you before anyone else did. He looked down at his glass. I don't want you to disappear. I'm not disappearing, Lucas. I'm just stepping back. There's a difference. What's the difference? I thought about it. Disappearing means you're gone and no one can find you. Stepping back means you're still here, but you're letting other people figure things out on their own. He nodded like that made sense. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I made this for you. In art class, I unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing. Colored pencils, a house with a big sun overhead, and 2 figures standing in front of it. One tall, one small. Underneath, in careful handwriting, it said, Grandma and me. My throat tightened. This is beautiful. I used the good pencils, he said. The ones you bought me last Christmas. I reached across the table and took his hand. Thank you, Lucas. I'm going to frame this. He grinned. And for a moment, everything else fell away. The money, the silence, the years of feeling invisible. All that mattered was this boy, this moment, this proof that love didn't have to come with conditions. When it was time for him to go, I walked him to the door. He put on his helmet and climbed onto his bike, then looked back at me. Grandma? Yes? I don't care about the house or the money or whatever. I just want to see you sometimes. I smiled. You can see me anytime, sweetheart. Just knock. He pedaled away down the street, and I watched until he turned the corner. Then I went inside, sat down in Frank's chair, and let myself cry. Not from sadness, from something else, something that felt like hope. A month later, I received a letter. No return address, but I recognized Amanda's handwriting. I opened it at the kitchen table, bracing myself. Dorothy, it began. Not Mom. Never Mom. Kevin and I have discussed the situation, and we think it's best if we take some space from each other. We don't want Lucas confused by the tension. We'll reach out when we're ready to have a mature conversation about the future. In the meantime, please respect our boundaries. I read it twice, then I folded it and placed it in the drawer with the other letters, the ones full of requests disguised as updates, the thank you notes that never actually said thank you, the Christmas cards signed only with their names, no message, no warmth. Respect their boundaries. After years of them ignoring mine, I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Spring came early that year. The desert bloomed with wildflowers, and I spent more time outside than I had in years. June and I started taking morning walks. I joined a book club. I even signed up for a senior trip to the Grand Canyon, something I'd always wanted to do but never made time for. One evening, as I was watering the garden, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. "Hi, Grandma. This is Lucas. I got a new phone for my birthday. Can I call you sometime?" I smiled and typed back immediately. "Anytime, sweetheart. I'm always here." He called that night. We talked for an hour. About school, about his friends, about the dog he wanted but couldn't have because Amanda was allergic. He told me he'd joined the art club and was learning to draw portraits. He asked if he could draw me someday. "I'd be honored," I said. After we hung up, I sat on the patio and watched the stars come out. The desert sky was vast and clear, the kind of sky that made you feel small and infinite at the same time. I thought about Frank, about what he would say if he were here. Probably something simple and true, like, "You did good, Dot. You finally did good." I didn't know what the future held. I didn't know if Kevin would ever come around, or if Amanda would ever see me as more than an obstacle. But I knew one thing for certain. I was done waiting to be loved. I was done earning my place in a family that treated me like a subscription. I was done pouring from an empty cup and pretending I wasn't thirsty. Lucas called me again the next week, and the week after that. He sent me drawings in the mail, carefully folded and addressed in his neat handwriting. I framed every single one, and one afternoon, as I was hanging his latest piece above the fireplace, I caught my reflection in the glass. Gray hair, lined face, 68 years of living, written in every crease. But my eyes were different. They weren't tired anymore. They weren't waiting. They were clear. I smiled at the woman in the glass. She smiled back. For the first time in years, I recognized her. She was me, just me, and that was finally enough.